morning. We've got general questions. Question number 1, George Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what preparations it is making to deal with the number of people expected to visit Scotland during the Commonwealth Games.
Minister Shona Robertson.
2014 is a momentous year for Scotland, and we look forward to welcoming visitors from around the world for the Commonwealth Games, the Ryder Cup and Homecoming, as well as providing a spectacular sporting and cultural programme. We're working with Visit Scotland transport providers and other partners to ensure that visitors, whether coming from near or further afield, have the best possible experience in Scotland during the Commonwealth Games.
George Adam.
Thank the Minister for the answer. As the Minister may know, Glasgow Airport and Paisley will welcome many of the athletes and spectators, effectively making Paisley the gateway to the Games. Can I ask the Minister how the Scottish Government and Games organisers are working with the airport to ensure a smooth journey for all users of the airport during these Games?
Minister.
Well, the Scottish Government very much recognises that Glasgow Airport is one of the key arrival points for the Commonwealth Games. For that reason, we've been working closely with Glasgow Airport Limited and the Games Organising Committee throughout the planning phases of the Games, but I'm happy to write to the member to provide him with more detail.
Question 2, Jackie Bailey.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on the reported underspend of discretionary housing payments by some local authority.
Minister Margaret Burgess.
The latest figures available for expenditure and discretionary housing payments were published earlier this month and cover the period 1st of April 2013 to 31st January 2014. I have noted that in these figures some local authorities had not yet spent their full allocation. I would encourage anyone who needs assistance with their housing costs to apply for a DHP. In addition, I would encourage all local authorities to review their processes to ensure that they are doing all they can to help those who are struggling financially as a result of welfare reforms.
Jackie Bailey.
The Minister will recall that when we last debated this on the 13th of March, she appeared to suggest that there may be an opportunity to use DHP underspend to wipe out the debt that had been accrued by tenants struggling to pay the bedroom tax this past year. Would she care to confirm this now?
Minister.
What I said at the last occasion was that we were looking at what the total underspend would be for the year, what funding we have made available to 2014-15, and if that funding can be targeted better at those that need it, because we are aware that the DHP allocations do not match the areas of need, and therefore the top-up doesn't match that either, and that's why we need to get the cap removed on DHPs. But we are very clear that any additional funding that the Scottish Government has committed to the financial year 2014-15 will be fully used to mitigate the bedroom tax, and we're looking at ways of doing that.
Question number 3, Neil Bibby.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it plans to take to improve public transport links to and from Renfrewshire.
Minister Keith Brown.
Following completion of the Glasgow Airport Strategic Transport Network study, I have asked Transport Scotland to work with Glasgow Airport, Renfrewshire Council and Glasgow City Council in considering further the feasibility of a tram train link from Glasgow Airport to Glasgow Central Station. Public transport links will also be improved through the May 2014 rail timetable, which will enhance the frequency of services towards Paisley, with up to 4 trains an hour operating between Glasgow and Gourock in both directions during the interpeak. And that will further enhance the connectivity with ferry sailings from Gourock, stations on the route between Glasgow and Gourock with Renfrew.
Neil Bibby.
I thank the Minister for that answer. I understand the Minister also recently met with the RailQuest group regarding the Glasgow Crossrail project. RailQuest believes that this project would not only benefit Renfrewshire, Ayrshire and Inverclyde, but have national benefits by linking these areas to Central and East Scotland by train. Can the Minister tell us what the Scottish Government intends to do following this meeting? For example, given this project's potential to have regional and national importance, will they commit to working with RailQuest to carry out a feasibility study so we can take Crossrail forward?
Minister.
It was indeed an interesting meeting with RailQuest, but the outcome of that meeting was for me to say to RailQuest that if they want to take this proposal forward, and it's not one of the priorities currently being pursued by the Scottish Government, they would really have to get to the stage of working with the local regional transport partnership as the relevant body to take it through to the next stage, perhaps a stag study. That would be the first stage for it to be taken further forward and for any serious consideration to be given to taking that. But of course, in the meantime, we are committed to, for example, a nearly £750 million improvement to the Edinburgh-Glasgow through the Edinburgh-Glasgow Improvement Project, and we will continue to invest in rail services in the west of Scotland.
Question 4, James Kelly.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what it is doing to promote the living wage in Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the Government takes low pay very seriously, and we are leading the way by doing all we can to ensure that as many people as possible benefit from the living wage. Our commitment to support the Scottish living wage for the duration of this Parliament is a decisive long-term commitment to those on the lowest of incomes. We continue to ensure that all staff covered by the public sector pay policy are paid the Scottish living wage, which will increase to £7.65 per hour for pay settlements in 2014-15 and benefit thousands of public sector employees. And we want to encourage others to follow the example we have set. That is why we have funded a pilot for the Poverty Alliance to deliver a living wage accreditation scheme which aims to increase the number of employers paying the living wage in all sectors in Scotland to make decent pay the norm in our country.
James Kelly.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. It's been brought to my attention that some Scottish Government directorates and NDPBs are subcontracting out jobs which used to be supported directly and therefore are creating a low-pay loophole. We know from a Daily Record story last year that Scottish Government cleaning jobs subcontracted at Atlantic Quay will not have been paid the living wage. Given that the payment of the living wage should be a priority, will the Cabinet Secretary commit to an urgent review of all jobs which are subcontracted by the Government's own agencies ahead of Stage 3 of the procurement bill?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, what I would say to Mr Kelly is that the Government takes this issue very seriously. There are certain aspects of work that is carried out in the Government's areas of activity that will be the subject to contracts which does not involve individuals becoming part of the public sector pay policy. And that's the distinction that Mr Kelly is making within his question. The Government is exploring actively the nature of pay arrangements within many of these contract arrangements as part of our general effort to ensure that the living wage is a major part of the approach to the payment of public sector staff, and that people in low pay situations are given the protection of the living wage.
John Mason.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that raising the statutory minimum wage is the real long-term answer to low pay rather than a voluntary living wage?
Cabinet Secretary.
Clearly, a statutory minimum wage at a higher level is a way of enshrining the principles of the living wage campaign. The Scottish Government has made clear in the document Scotland's Future that our proposed Fair Work Commission will ensure that the minimum wage rises at the very least in line with inflation, and something that, if that happened in the course of the last 5 years, would have boosted the pay of the lowest earners by over £600.
Question 5, Ian Gray.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on the level of local planning decisions overturned on appeal by reporters acting on ministers' behalf.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, Scottish ministers wish to see the right developments in the right places. Reporters on the Directorate for Planning and Environmental Appeals, acting on behalf of Scottish ministers, are required to make their decisions on the planning merits of the case and in accordance with the development plan for the area, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. We are content that reporters are making decisions on planning appeals on this basis.
Ian Gray.
Figures recently released by the Scottish Government show that such decisions are rising in my constituency in East Lothian, and so too is anger at those decisions taken on ministers' behalf by reporters against the wishes of local people. The latest example is Beveridge Row in Belhaven. In correspondence, the Planning Minister refused my request to meet with the local community council or the public on this issue because the case was live. But he also rejected any responsibility for the decision itself because it has been taken by a reporter. Can the Cabinet Secretary not understand that to my constituents that just looks like having it both ways? Either it is Minister's decision or it is not. Can the Cabinet Secretary not see that this just undermines any trust residents might have in the integrity of the planning process? And will he at least agree to ask his Planning Minister to meet with my constituents once the decision does issue in order to explain his position directly to them?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think that I'm a bit surprised at Ian Gray's question, given the fact that Mr Gray served as a minister in the Scottish Government and is familiar with the arrangements around planning legislation. And indeed, the planning legislation that we operate under, fundamentally in this respect, was put in place by the administration prior to this administration in 2006-2007. So I'm a bit surprised at the tone and the nature of his question. The system of planning appeals and the role of the Director for Planning and Environmental Appeals is very clearly set out to operate, as I explained in my original answer, within the framework of planning merits of individual cases and in a compatible fashion with the development plan. Now, I appreciate that these cases can often result in significant concern in localities about decisions being taken, but I can assure Parliament that the reporters take decisions consistent with the existing planning legislation that is in place and the frameworks that go with that. Now, on the specific case about Beveridge Row in Dunbar, I will certainly look at the issues. I think it's entirely justifiable and appropriate for the Planning Minister to indicate that it would not be appropriate for him to meet while a planning appeal is actually being heard. I think that would be really most inappropriate for that to happen. As to whether a meeting can take place once the planning appeal is determined is an entirely different question, and I will consider that and reply to the member.
Malcolm Chisholm.
Can I tell the Minister that anger is an understatement for the emotions felt in the Broughton area of my constituent when the reporter this week gave approval to a planning application for a housing development with, alongside a primary school playground. Is it against the wishes of the Council? Is it not the case that over the last 7 years the Planning Minister has withdrawn from being involved with certain planning appeals that previously the Minister would have had a role in deciding?
But I think the same point applies, that what drives the planning decisions are existing planning policies and development plans that will be in existence in particular localities. And these decisions are taken on an evidence base. They're not taken because of particular priorities of ministers or authorities. They are taken based on the existence of planning policies. And I quite understand that local communities can often be concerned by some of these decisions, but they are taken on the basis of planning policies, and whether that's undertaken by ministerial involvement or whether that's undertaken by the stance of reporters, the same considerations and conditions have to be assessed by whoever is taking the decision.
Question number 6, Liz Smith.
To ask the Scottish Government what additional support it plans to provide for the development of winter sport.
Minister Shona Robertson.
Well, I'm sure the whole Chamber will be aware that the all-Scottish Team GB Curlers and the men's, women's and Paralympic teams returned with medals from the Winter Olympics in Sochi. In recognition of that fantastic performance, the Sports Scotland and Stirling Council have recently announced that they will work in partnership to deliver a multi-million-pound investment into Stirling Sports Village. This will significantly enhance curling facilities for both performance athletes and community use and represents a further boost for the sport in Scotland. With regard to other winter sports, Sports Scotland has also provided more than £5 million into Scottish ice rinks. In addition to ice facilities, Sports Scotland has invested significant funds to other winter sporting facilities, including a £933,000 award for the Midlothian Snow Sports Centre and a £78,000 grant for Newmilns Snow and Ski Complex.
Liz Smith.
Thank the Minister for that. I think we all warmly welcome these commitments. However, given that as part of the UK, Scotland currently benefits from access to over £7 billion of sports funding, with 1,300 elite athletes currently receiving direct financial support, could the Minister tell Parliament how much financial support would be available in an independent Scotland to support our Scottish sportsmen and women?
Minister.
Well, can I say that the total investment in the Winter Olympic and performance programmes by Scotland has been in the region of £3.75 to £4 million, and that's over and above the funding provided through Sport Scotland to the sports governing bodies. And of course, we pay in and contribute towards UK sport, and therefore would be entitled to our share of that resource. And in addition, the lottery monies that currently go into sport through Sport Scotland would continue as they do now. We have some of the most fantastic state-of-the-art sports facilities that are more than adequate to make sure that our athletes continue to perform with the best on the world stage.
Question number 7, Richard Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support it is providing to NHS Grampian to address waiting times for treatment.
Cabinet Secretary Alex Neil.
Presiding Officer, I am aware the Board has been experiencing capacity difficulties in delivering the waiting time guarantee and standards, and that is why we have invested £18 million to increase capacity by building new theatres and employing more doctors, more nurses and more support staff. This additional capacity has just come on stream and should enable a significant reduction in waiting times, with the 12 weeks legal time guarantee being delivered during the quarter ending September 2014. My officials are continue to work with the Board to support delivery of waiting times.
Richard Baker.
Cabinet Secretary for his answer. Yesterday we learned NHS Grampian is not meeting waiting times targets for cancer treatment, and I have previously written to him after 20 consultants in NHS Grampian complained of chronic underfunding of services. Is he now saying today that he's giving a guarantee, because of the resources outlined today, that these waiting times for treatment will be definitely met by the end of this year?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the issue has not been gross underfunding, as Mr Baker says. There is actually a shortage of particular types of cancer specialists, and the north of Scotland, in particular Grampian, has been affected by that. And I'm sure the member is aware of the particular challenges in attracting people into the Grampian area, given the high cost of housing, etc. But can I also point out to the member that if he saw the increases I announced 2 weeks ago for board budgets for next year, Grampian was the highest, with a 4% increase, recognising the need to meet the NRAC target within the next 2 years or so. So there is a very substantial real-term increase into resources to Grampian Health Board, as it should be, both to meet our NRAC requirements and at the same time to ensure that this additional capacity is up and running so that Grampian can meet its waiting time guarantees.
Question number 8, in the name of John Lamont, has not been lodged. The member has provided me with a satisfactory explanation. Question number 9, Margaret Mitchell.
To ask the Scottish Government when it will publish its response to the review of expenses and funding of civil litigation in Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary Kenny MacAskill.
The Scottish Government is currently working on its response to Sheriff Principal Taylor's review of the expenses and funding of civil litigation in Scotland, and will publish it as soon as possible.
Margaret Mitchell.
I don't know if that really moves us much further forward, Cabinet Secretary. One of the recommendations, however, of the Taylor review was to look at claims management companies being regulated as they are in England and Wales. Is the Cabinet Secretary minded to accept this recommendation, and if so, can he elaborate on how this would be done?
No, I was very grateful for Sheriff Principal Taylor's response on that. I discussed it with him at a meeting. I do think it's one that we have to reflect upon, but I can give the member an assurance that we will be publishing our response as soon as we can, and clearly our comments on that will be part of it.
Sorry, question number 10, James Donner.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its recently completed and upcoming capital investment projects.
Cabinet Secretary Nicola Sturgeon.
On the 17th of March, we published a report detailing progress on delivery of our infrastructure investment plan. In 2013, projects worth £625 million were completed. In addition, our published updated project pipeline is a comprehensive overview of all major infrastructure projects which are either ongoing or under development.
James Dornan.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. It is clear that the Scottish Government are continuing to invest in capital projects, supporting employment and making a huge difference to the lives of people all over Scotland. This is despite the cuts that have been imposed by Westminster. Does she agree with me that only with the full powers of independence can even more investment be made in Scotland's infrastructure, making a substantial difference to our economy in the short, medium and longer term?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I agree. with the member. The full powers of independence, of course, would provide us with greater flexibility to manage capital investment and to determine our priorities according to the needs of the Scottish economy. Independence presents us with an opportunity to invest more and ultimately to invest in a way that enables us to create a more successful, prosperous Scotland, and I would have thought that's something members on all sides of the chamber would support.